And thank all of you for coming out and participating, because we do intend to have some good, rich Q&A with this. This is a learning experience for us. That's kind of the way I'm approaching it. And if you walk this back, Sheldon, so we started our Diversity and Inclusion Council earlier this year. And we have a good team, and we were kind of thinking about, what's the structure that we want for this council? What are the things that we want to try to accomplish together? And one of the obvious things that kind of came out in those first few meetings was, what are some best-in-class examples of industries like commercial real estate that are that have been very intentional about diversity and inclusion, and maybe at one point looked as lopsided as this industry looks. And then Carol's like, I have an idea. He's like, Sheldon Good has a wonderful brand in the Atlanta market and in the business community nationally, and was part of the Georgia Power team way back when, who looked at diversity and said, we can change this employee population, and we can put people of color, gender diversity at all different levels of the organization, and really over time have a cultural shift. And so that's how this came together. And then I asked Carol, do you think we could get him to come talk to us? And she was like, yeah, I think we could maybe make that happen. So that's context, that's the backdrop. So let's just start with that. If you can start, Sheldon, with your days at Georgia Power, what those early conversations looked like, and what that plan eventually turned out to be.
Okay, great. So a little bit of level setting. I need everybody to do one thing real quick. Take out your phones, go to LinkedIn, because we're going to start a conversation today that we're going to have to continue. I know a lot of them say, well, what did he mean by that? What did he say? So let's agree we're going to start a conversation today, but we're going to continue it. So everybody go to LinkedIn, find me, send a connect, and for those that's hesitant, the first 10 people to do it, I'll give you a copy of my next book. So let's start that way, because I know we're going to get you some good stuff. Now, having said that, can we talk? Let's go back to 2000. It was the summer, and I get a call from David Ratcliffe, the CEO at that time, that says, you got to get up here real quick. We've got a problem. At that point, I was running our customer care center, about 700 employees, the most diverse part of the organization. What I did not know was that 8 people had just filed a lawsuit the day before claiming racial discrimination. And they had attorneys who were going to pursue class action. What David called me for was, out of the 8 employees, 3 was from my call center. And so obviously imagine, the thing that you're worrying about is, keeping the lights on, and how many resolving customer complaints. And now the conversation is, we have 3 of your employees out of the 8 that feel as though they're not valued because of their experience and background. They don't feel respected because of their race, and they don't feel connected to our values and all the things that we hold dear. So it started out as a legal action. After many conversations with David, the legal team, the other senior leaders, David made a call. He said, I'm going to let the legal people handle the legal stuff. But if 8 of our employees, who, this is important, these employees have averaged 28 years of service, that's been around for over 2 decades, almost 3 decades, feel this way, there's got to be something. I don't know if it raises to the level of legal not legal discrimination, but discrimination at a class action level. But I'm going to take it to heart, and we're going to change. So I point that out to say that any change, whether it's change in business, change in culture, it starts at the top with leadership making a decision that we need to change from where we are, who we are, to something different or something better. And the thing that I think set us apart from other companies was first making that intentional decision to change. But David said, we're not going to, I'm responsible for this, but I can't do this by myself.
Right.
We have to have, and at that point, this was way before employee resource groups, employee councils, and all the things that we take for granted to 18 years later. He said we've got to do something, but he says we've got to involve employees, and that I think that sort of insight I think yielded results, which is still paying dividends today. Involving employees in making the change.
Mm-hmm. So if you go back, you said this was 2000.
Right.
So Radcliffe is in the COC and decided he was going to make this a priority for Georgia Power.
Right.
What did those early planning months look like as far as you are engaging the people, but what does that really mean? And was there any baseline measurement that took place?
That's right.
And then setting any goals, because you and I had a prep call and we talked about not the numbers, it's making the people count, but walk us through the I guess the framework of the D&I strategic plan.
Yeah, so at that point, again, what we now call diversity and inclusion was still relatively new. In fact, there was only one, maybe two companies that had made intentional efforts. One was IBM, the other was American Express. So the first thing that David did, he put together a steering committee, and he sent us out to talk to the folks at IBM and American Express. And they had a lot of things going on, but no metrics and no evidence that any of it worked. So while we were doing that, David says, why don't we get some advice from the community? Why don't we get some input from the community? And so he put together the first ever external diversity advisory council, not knowing what we were going to get, but he says, if I get 10 prominent people from the community, they can help us. And then something else happened. We didn't anticipate this. So sometimes you get lucky. Sometimes you just get lucky. Coca-Cola at the time, who had also been sued like weeks before, settled. And the consent decree that was put together as a part of the settlement, we said, can we borrow? And we literally took the consent decree that says, you have to do this, you have to do this. And we looked at it and we said, what can we do? How fast can we do it? What makes sense? And we came up with basically 4 buckets of work that we had to do. Number 1, we knew we had to change the lack of, I'll use the word diversity, the lack of diversity in leadership. At that point, 2000, at the C team and 2 levels down, it was predominantly white males. There was maybe 1, maybe 2 African-American males in a company of, at that time, about 15,000. They're much smaller today. So they said, we've got to change leadership. Because if we start bringing in a bunch of diversity at the bottom, and they have no mentors, they have nobody to be sponsors, they're going to just leave. So we've got to put in place we got to look differently at the top. Right. So there was a whole bunch of work around that. He says we've got to get employees involved. So that's when we came up with things like We borrowed it from American Express and IBM. We came up with this employee resource groups. We called them affinity groups at the time. And we immediately started putting in place the plow on the ground and helping the environment get ready for these employee resource groups. And then we said, well, why don't we have a council, an employee diversity council? So we said we'll have an internal diversity council to work with the external diversity council. So we said that's a way to keep employees involved. The third thing he says, we got to do some training. We don't know what we don't know. We've got biases. We just don't know what we don't know. We think we're good people. We try to do good work, but our employees are telling us something different.
Yeah.
So we've got to do some training. And we were talking earlier about the race awareness workshop. Mm-hmm. So David said, I'm not interested in any touchy-feely stuff. You have to ask him about this race awareness 2-day program. He says, I need something that is going to really wake us up and get this and help us to see things differently. So we embarked on the race awareness workshop for leaders. And then we did diversity 101 for employees. So we had to do some training. And then last but not least, and I believe to this day, it is the single most important bucket of work that we did. We said, why did these employees come forward to us and tell us what's going on? And when we asked them, they said, we didn't trust you. We believed if we told you, you wouldn't believe us. If we told you, you wouldn't act on the information. And third, if we told you, you would retaliate against us. That hurt him to the core. Yeah. He says, we've got to change that. And they completely, and this is something that resonates with me today because I'm responsible for equal employment opportunity, affirmative action, Title VII, Title VI compliance. He completely shut down the shop and built it from scratch. And that was huge. One of the things he did, and they're still doing it today, and they're the only utility that I know that's doing it. Imagine if you receive some discipline of some sort. Imagine being able to have a choice of having your case, appealing your case to an officer of the company that will look into your case, or having a sort of, let's call it a peer review. A peer review that's been trained to look into cases like this and hear them, and they will make a decision about whether the discipline is upheld or reduced or thrown out. Putting that sort of decision making in the hands of employees, it says, if we want you to trust us, if we, the leaders of this company, want you to trust us, we're going to trust you first. And to this day, I believe that's the single biggest thing that helped change the culture and help begin to win employee trust back. Now, in those buckets, there were literally 48 initiatives divided into 4 buckets. But those were the buckets of work. And they embarked on those in 2000, and they completed the last initiative in 2004. Took 4 years. 2004. So that's a significant investment of time, resources, and energy.
So it's interesting. Sheldon mentioned this race awareness workshop. So this past weekend, and you'll probably see some coverage about this, but myself and Dallas Smith, who've been in the room, know, Chris Aaron Keel, who's over at CLA, and Kristen Lamb, who used to be the president of the Atlanta Commercial Board, and then now her successor, Robin Goodwin, was involved. And anyway, we went through this workshop on Friday and Saturday just a few days ago. I had been through it through Leadership Atlanta in 2011, and I didn't grow up in a racist home. I was exposed to racism at school. But that 2011 race awareness workshop was very much an awakening where you have an opportunity to really understand and have a serious discussion about racism, sexism, homophobia, you name it, you're going into it over these 2 days. And we thought about, and it was something that I've shared within the D&I Council, that if we could get Mike Sidbright at JLL in the room, and we could get, and Ferguson couldn't make it, but David Lanier was there, and Audra was there, and we had, 30 of us in the room. And it was an incredibly powerful Friday and Saturday, and it breaks you down and it builds you up. But it gets you involved in the conversation. And I was mentioning to the facilitator that we were doing this today. And I mentioned it was Sheldon, and the facilitator, I'm not going to name his name, and that's intentional. Big fan. They're friends and mutual admiration club. And but I told him about Sheldon coming, and he told me about a video that David Radcliffe would send, and I guess this video, Sheldon was maybe a certain level where he couldn't get out to the masses.
Right. It was meant to kick off the race awareness classes that he could not personally kick off.
Right. And can you share with this group, because I think it's pretty telling, and it gets to your point about it has to start at the top, but how he communicated, like, this is the journey we're going on.
Right.
And then I'll let you.
Yeah, so again, this is David Radcliffe, the CEO of Georgia Power at the time, went on to become the CEO of Southern Company since retired. But he made a personal commitment to kick off every training class. But he knew he couldn't be there every one, so he filmed the video. And he looks dead straight at the camera, and he delivers this message that goes something like this. This is the journey that we're going on. We have to be better. We have to change. Not everybody is going to like it. Not everybody is going to appreciate it or understand it. But I need you. He's talking to the people in the class to make a decision. Do you want to go forward or not? And if he called it a leadership challenge, if you step up and say, this is not for me, I will help you find something else. But we are going to go forward. And you may not go forward with us. And he goes a little bit further in the video, and he talks about the fact that if you that he wants to put in place a change that outlives his tenure. And he says something like this: when I leave, people are going to say something like, "Wow, did you hear David left?" And then he says the next thing they're going to say is, "I wonder who's going to get his job." And internally, that gets a chuckle, because everybody was always fighting and worrying about, who was going to get the next job, because there was absolutely no trust at that time in the way that we went about hiring and promoting people. So it was just his way of letting people know, I'm going to put in place a change that is going to outlive me in terms of my tenure here as president. And I can tell you, I literally was on the phone talking to their basically their chief diversity officer headed over, and was asking them a couple of questions, and was confirming some of the things I know it's going to be saying here today, because I wanted to be able to say unequivocally that a lot of the things that were put in place in 2000 are 18 years later still in place. Yeah. So I confirmed that no less than 30 minutes prior to coming over.
Oh, great. So talk to us a little bit about Sheldon. You go from Georgia Power, you stay in the energy field, you go to Allentown, Pennsylvania at PPL, and then what that experience, like that transition to PPL, any sort of similar practices that you brought into there, and what did that look like? And then what did Oshkosh look like as well?
Yeah, so again, a little bit of level setting. What I have found in going from Georgia Power to Pennsylvania Power and Light, and then to Oshkosh, and now at MARTA, is here we are 18 years later, and I'm still having to explain to people what diversity is and what diversity is not. So can we have a conversation about that? Because there, especially in the time and the environment that we find ourselves, if you ask 10 people what diversity is, you will get 15 definitions. So even if we can't agree on what it is, let's talk about what it's not. Diversity, and I shared this in a one-on-one conversation with you. Diversity was never and has never been about counting people. It's always been and always will be, regardless of what you hear, about making people count. And we're talking about everybody. We're talking about everybody in the organization coming to work, going home at the end of the day, feeling respected, not regardless of their difference, but because of their difference. That they feel valued because of the experience, the background, the education, the knowledge, the competency that they bring to their organization every day. And then feeling connected to something bigger than themselves. That's what diversity has been and always will be. It is not a program meant to point fingers, to place blame, to make anyone feel guilty, or to benefit people of color and women at the expense of white males. And that's what the persisting myth has been. And it just gets me so angry because after almost 2 decades of work and thousands of people like myself doing this in communities and companies and across the country, it still seems to be this persisting myth that, well, I don't have time for that diversity stuff. You know, that's for people of color and for women. And that's simply not true. It's always been about how do we get everybody feeling a certain kind of way so that they are producing and generating results that benefit the company, and then everybody that's a part of the company. That's what it's always been about. So I leave Georgia Power, I go to Pennsylvania Power and Light, and the first thing that I faced was, even though I'm born and raised in Philadelphia, so the only reason I'm going back is I'm trying to pull a LeBron James, right? I'm trying to go back home and help my home team win a championship. What I found out was, well, let's do a little quick quiz here. So you're here in Atlanta. What 2 schools do you have to have graduated from to really have gotten an education? Come on. Georgia Tech, right? So here I am with a PhD from the University of Alabama. Do you think I got any love at Georgia Tech? No.
I'm not sure you're going to get any love right here.
See how those biases kick in? National championship, of course we beat the hometown dogs. You get no love, right? You see how these biases kick in? So guess what? I go to Pennsylvania and I face the same sort of bias because I was born and raised in Philadelphia, and it says, but you didn't graduate from the Penn State. You haven't been here for 10 or 15 years. I was like, my gosh, I'm leaving the world champion of utilities. I'm coming here to help you guys, but the biases kicked in. Education, degree, where you went to school, how long you've been there. I was the highest ranking African American in the company. I thought African Americans would flock to me wanting to get mentored and wisdom. No, you can't offer me anything. You didn't graduate from the Penn State.
Well, this is a Penn State grad right here. He's so happy. He's been waiting for somebody to mention Penn State.
Guys, we talk about these individual biases, but they are organizational biases that are strong. They're not meant to be bad. They're not meant, but they act like headwinds. So let me give you a metaphor. You fly from New York to California. It takes approximately 5 hours, 20 minutes. You take the identical plane, identical pilot, you come back from LA to New York. It takes you about 4 hours and 47 minutes. So is the pilots flying a plane from LA to New York better? Are they more skilled? We know that's not true. We know that the pilots when you fly from New York to LA, you face headwinds at the Rockies. It means it slows you down. It means you have to burn more fuel. It means you have to make adjustments to get around some of the headwinds. That's the same thing, that's the same impact that organizational biases have on people that's not in that sweet spot. So if you're at a Georgia Power or Pennsylvania Power Light, or let's take Georgia Power, you didn't graduate from Georgia or Georgia Tech, you didn't grow up in the South, you're not Christian, you're not straight, you're not this, you're not that. You face headwinds. Those headwinds make you have to burn more fuel. They slow you down. And they make you have to constantly adjust how you show up, how you talk, who you talk to. Is the day a tie day? Is the day an open collar day? Is the day jeans day? Oh my God, don't wear jeans. So these programs, no, you laugh, but I'm serious. I am so serious. I was told one day, Shelton, I saw you in jeans last Friday. You know that if you really want to be a VP, you notice that none of the VPs wear jeans on Friday. This was true. These things go, and they're invisible. They're unwritten rules, God, but they have impact because people then act on these, and their behaviors then manifest themselves and have impact. But they disproportionately impact women and people of color. Hence, people believe you have to take intentional actions to mute and blunt that impact. So all I'm saying is when I left Georgia Power and I went to Pennsylvania Power Light, I'm thinking I'm in this position of privilege. I'm coming back to an area I was born and raised in. I'm coming from a top utility, but the diversity person, still had to overcome organizational biases. And I didn't want the CEO, Bill Spence, to say, y'all have to do what this guy says. That's not going to make it effective. So you have to get out, you have to build relationships, you have to show value, you have to show impact. That's important. Why? Because diversity has always been about trying to drive organizational success by making sure everyone on the team feels connected and is producing at a level that will optimize, the results for the company. So I think that's very important. And I found when I went to Wisconsin, the same thing. And then I come back home to my new home, which is, Atlanta now, and I find within an organization that has as much diversity in it at Barna, the same identical challenges that I had when I was at Oshkosh that had less than 6% people of color. So it's the same sort of myths, the same sort of persistent misperceptions about what it is we're trying to do.
Yeah, it's interesting, Sheldon. So one of the discussions we've had in the CNI Council is trying to have honest dialogue about what are the barriers to getting in the business. And we have a kind of a complex, it's actually a simple platform. You either have investor or occupier, but then there's all these sub-businesses under. So it's probably, in this office alone, there's probably 20 different kind of practice groups, if you will, kind of different specialized niche businesses. And so we've started this journey a little bit through the help of some people on the council on what is it that is preventing people from being attracted to the business. And this is specifically around people of color and women. And if I reflect, and I was just meeting with a gentleman at 11 o'clock, and was introduced, he was introduced to me by his father. And I'm telling you, I could spend a quarter to a third of the year just fielding those type of meetings, just sitting down with people, and I would say 90% are white males. And so there's just this cycle, and you can see kind of how this thing plays out, where if I take the meetings, it's a friend of a friend, so that's how a lot of it starts. So one thing that we're trying to do, and is Lindsay here? Okay, yes. All right, so Lindsay McIntosh, stand up, Lindsay, sorry to embarrass you. So Lindsay is my HR partner, and all right. All right, thank you. So Lindsay flew in this morning, and Lindsay and I are working together on a larger engagement survey. That's kind of step one. And then we're going to kind of look at the results on that. We're going to then try to work with a project that Miles has started around what are some of the perceived hurdles. And then there's a next step on this when we get kind of the data, we get some of the feedback, and then we begin to say, okay, so what are the proactive strategies that we need to put in place? We can't wait for the phone to ring, right? So what are we doing, whether it's on-campus recruiting, whether it's just creating, a really viable value prop for people to be attracted to the business, or make it more attractive. But part of it is just kind of getting out and I think, sharing, this is what commercial real estate is about. So our, getting to finally a question, our probably issue is making sure that we have structure around getting pipeline of great talent.
Right. Yeah. So I was waiting for you to get to the point where you guys were intentionally going to campuses to recruit and create internship positions. I mean, when we talked on the phone, you talked about just how natural it is that people come into the business, you mentoring, talking to acquaintances of friends and colleagues, or sons and daughters, and just by the way it is, they happen to be white males, and so they get interested, they get interested in the field, they get some early mentoring and coaching. I would say if you don't already have an intentional program where you are going to colleges, going to conferences, going to career fairs, to at least start with building or changing your intern pool. And that's assuming that you even have interns. But if you don't, that's a great way to build a pipeline for the future. If you have an internship program, then I would look there and say, are we perpetuating the same, or are we in fact building a pool of potential future people? It is, I believe, the best investment that you can make that will give you the highest returns. Obviously, if you bring in interns and they come here to Atlanta, it should be hard to, at least not here, to convince them to come here and work. Then I believe that you should have a high probability of turning those interns into hires. My response to your question is at least start looking there. What are you doing intentionally and differently so that you get a different result? Let me speak candidly here. I was recruited from Pennsylvania Power and Light to Oshkosh Corporation, who at that point was pursuing a $50 billion contract with the Department of Defense for the next generation of joint light tactical vehicle. You know it as the Humvee. They hate to call it that because it's so much more. A two-star general who was heading up the selection in the procurement process told Wilson Jones, every time I come here, I say the same thing, which is, where are the people of color? And he says, you tell me the same thing. Well, we don't have any in our community. And he says, I tell you the same thing. What are you doing differently? He says, now I'm going to just put it as bluntly as I can. when we come back for the final selection, if I don't, although I don't expect you to automatically look different, if you don't have a plan, I'm probably not supposed to tell you this. This was a two-star general, but you're not going to fare well in the final selection for this contract. Next thing you know, I get a phone call. I know you're at Pennsylvania Power and Light, but you're a retired officer, retired combat pilot. You understand our culture. I know you don't want to come to the Midwest, but we need your help. And can you take one for the team? I says, I'm not going to come to Wisconsin to simply help you get a $50 billion contract.
I'll take 10%.
I didn't think about that. I was a little bit offended that he wanted, my thinking was that he wanted a token African-American retired officer to come in and be window dressing and help put together a plan that they never intended to execute. I says, I will come and I will help you put together a plan only if you will commit to me that you are serious about doing something different. And so he said, well, Dr. Good, what did you want them to do? I wanted a company that had 18,000 employees and had only 662 people of color to do something different. Don't tell me that you're there in the Fox Valley of Wisconsin and that you can't get people to come there. That's not true. What are you doing differently? Or have you ever gone to the National Society of Black Engineers annual conference and convince people that this is a great place to have a first job, a good place to start a career? Have you ever gone to the Society of Women Engineers, a conference that draws 10,000 female engineers from across the country every year? What are you doing differently? And I will tell you that now, Oshkosh Corporation is a platinum sponsor, and they're getting a pick. I mean, they're getting the first round draft picks out of those conferences every year, and for both conferences. And now they're beginning. You're not going to see it. You can't make that sort of change overnight, but you can start to send signals that something is different. He told me, well, what can I do about leadership? I said, well, what do you mean, what can you do about leadership? Well, we thought we had a new CFO on the hook, but he came and took a look around and I threw a bunch of money at him, but at the end of the day, he said no. I said, well, did you ever follow up with him to find out why? Well, and he kind of said no. If he, considering the offer I gave him, if he didn't want it, I figured I'd find somebody else. You gotta find out why a person who you offer a considerable amount of money would turn down coming to the Fox Valley. I bet you had nothing to do with the lack of diversity in the area. I bet you had nothing to do with the lack of diversity in the company. There's something else that person picked up on. So you have to, my point to you, John, is you have to be intentional about what it is you want to change. And you can't fix everything, and you can't fix it overnight. I told you about Georgia Power, 18 years of sustainability to bring about the sort of culture that they have today. But David knew when he started it, it wasn't going to be a sprint, it was going to be a marathon. I'm not a marathon runner, but I think part of it, of running a marathon, is saying, I've got to run 26 plus miles, and this is how I'm going to do it. I'm going to put one foot in front of the other, take it 1 mile at a time, and I would imagine that's how you do it. But you have to, it starts with knowing it's a marathon, not a sprint.
Yeah. And I want to make sure that we leave time here, Sheldon, to get, so we've got 14 minutes, and I'd love to hear some thoughts from members of the Cushman team. Anything on your mind? Well, actually, before I do that, I can't stop myself. Before I do that, I do think it starts with creating this culture of trust. And one of the things that was really an interesting takeaway, because there's plenty of people in this room who are not part of the D&I Council or maybe haven't been able to be at all the meetings. I think one of the most powerful things or biggest kind of takeaways for me is when we sat in that room And we created an environment where people could be honest, or at least I think we did. And there was one example, and I hope are you okay with me? Well, you were, didn't I, Josh? But I love Josh, and one thing that Josh said is that, I'm not sure, I don't know if I can totally be myself. And I loved the fact that he shared it with us, because that's kind of the first start. If we're not creating an environment where people feel they can be who they are, and then we're failing as a culture. We just are, and we're all responsible for that. So if you're not acknowledging your colleagues, and you're not asking how they're doing, and you're not doing that, and then you're failing, I'm failing. But the fact that Josh felt the comfort to share that was really important. And then it's like, so then how do I try to do my part and encourage others to do their part to create this environment where people do feel like they can come in and be themselves? And so I guess that's just more of a statement, and it's more of a just acknowledgement that, one, I appreciate you sharing that, and then two, I think we do have a responsibility while we're here. We spend a ton of our waking hours in this professional arena, and people should, they should feel, regardless of their background, they should feel like this is are you doing this on purpose, Will? All right, so that's enough of me talking. So thoughts from the audience here.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll go. Dr. Good, one of the things you talked about was the need to have change from the leadership at the leadership level. And that's a particular challenge for our industry because of the background of the industry. Those people that have that level of experience are primarily a lot of old white guys. So how, to attract people at that level is that much harder. I totally agree with the intern level, but to attract at that level is that much harder. What do you think about, just an example, the NFL Rooney Rule?
I knew. And again, it's so funny. Some of the solutions feed some of the perceptions. When I talk about Oscar, should we see it for? One of the things that he did after he did make that phone call and talk to that gentleman, he said, we failed because we tried to do the hire ourselves. I think it would have been a better investment to hire a third party that's a diverse firm that could find a person or people at our level that would come and want to join the leadership team at the current state that we are, with the understanding that we're trying to change things. And that person had not had any of that conversation. He came in, took a snapshot, and says, without understanding that he was being recruited and was being counted on to be a change agent. And the CEO later said, he said, man, if he had told me that, it would have made a difference. If it was me, and a firm says, what's one thing that I can do if I want to change leadership? And again, I'm not just talking about changing the gender, the race, or ethnicity makeup. I'm talking about putting in place individuals that's going to lead. I'm talking about playing chess, thinking 2 or 3 steps ahead. I need mentors. I need champions. I need people that's going to help groom my 1, 2 levels down. And so what you would have to do is, if it was me, and I could only do one thing or two, one thing I would do is I would go to an executive search firm like a Carrington and say, help me find the talent that I'm looking for. Start with the T word first. The talent I'm looking for was someone that's going to be different than who we are, that's going to help be a change agent. And here's the change I need this person or individuals to help me bring about. Number one, that you can start there. Now, the The Rooney Rule, I would only resort to if I didn't use an executive search firm. An executive search firm such as a Carrington and Carrington already know I'm not going to bring you a slate of candidates that's not diverse. But if you were doing it internally, I would turn to my HR, my talent acquisition team, and say, for level 1, which is my direct reports, in level 2, tier 1, tier 2, do not submit any slates that do not have diversity in the slate. And I would just make that a mandate and then put the onus on talent acquisition to make sure that the pool, that there's people applying for the jobs, and then therefore as you reach in there looking for your final slate, you should end up with a diverse slate. It's not hard, but you do have to be intentional. What I found, and I'll still go have some more questions, is we tiptoe around it. You won't get to the end result that you want by tiptoeing around it. And General Counsel, if you're in the room, I know you're not going to like what I just said. They never do. They never do. They're going to trot out 18 cases, and other case law that's going to say, that's putting us at risk. I vehemently disagree. You have to take those sort of intentional actions if you want to change. And I don't mince words about that. I really don't. Not when you talk about the top of the house.
Josh?
Thank you for coming. I appreciate you. I have 2 questions. So the first one is, how do we keep this same energy? You mentioned 4 years time to really make a big impact. That's going to be a minute in a company like ours. And then my second question is, what can I do? Pre-credentials like yours, doctor, and airman at the whole. Thank you, but I don't have like any type of resume. What can I do to, I guess, not demand that type of respect, but have that same type of response that you would get?
Yeah, easy. So let me ask you the first question, and I'm going to direct my response to you. Trust these guys. Tell them what you want, and then help them bring about the change that they want to see. That's the way you do it. You talk about the engagement survey. If you're going to do a survey, HR, make sure that leadership does 4 things and follow. Make sure they thank everybody for trusting them to give you their thoughts. Number 2, make sure that leadership tells them, we are going to respond to the survey and the information and feedback that you've given us. We promise you, we're going to act. We're not going to fix and do everything, but we are going to act. Number 3, we're going to involve you in making some of these changes. You're not going to just throw a bunch of stuff over the fence at us and expect us to fix it. No, you're going to help us. Number 4, we'll keep coming back to you and communicating on progress and keep moving forward. That's how you keep the energy. You get the people who will be most affected by it involved in the change. You already have a council. I don't know if you have employee resource groups, anything that you can do to get the people most affected by the change involved in making the change. They will keep saying, we're not quite there yet. We're not quite there yet. We need to keep moving. To your second question, I'm not quite sure if I understand it, but can I say this? Take a moment of privilege. The number 1 competency that I have now, the number 1 ammunition or the thing that I have going for me right now, I call it my position of privilege, is that I've reached a certain point in my career and I'm seasoned, and I can afford to show up authentically and transparently. I come to work every day fearless. I come to work every day because it's like, man, I'm finally here. I'm that guy. I'm the guy that, the whole leadership team is saying, what should we do? What direction should we go in? And so I'm the person that's supposed to be saying, we can't do that, or we need to go in this direction. So I would say to you, as you aspire in your career, everybody thinks promotion, everybody thinks title, everybody thinks money. But imagine, if you would, being able to come to work every day, not worrying about, are you dressed appropriately? You know what I mean? it's like, wow, is today business casual or today is it a tie day? You know, can I wear dreads or do I have to wear my hair close shaven? Imagine every day, and I know you know what I'm talking about, every day waking up. So I'll just talk about me, every day waking up thinking, okay, how do I show up today? I can't be too arrogant. I can't speak out of turn. I can't do this. I can't do that. Imagine if you could wake up every day saying, wow, this is what I'm going to do today, and not be so preoccupied by being afraid about what you can't do. And so I know what you're talking about, but aspire to be in a position of influence so that you can say, I'm sorry. I think I hear what you're saying, but suppose we try a different way. And being able to talk to your manager, your manager's manager, or John without any concern about how that's going to come back and hurt your career and stuff like that. Imagine working without fear. Imagine that. I would take that and take a pay cut. Early in my career, I won't do it now. But there was days that I would have loved to shown up without worrying about, if I make a mistake today, is it going to haunt me for the rest of my time here? And is it going to haunt me because of the color of my skin? So you want to be transparent, you want to be authentic, and you want to be fearless. Don't everything else will come. Everything else will come. That's my free advice, Coach.
Good. So, yes, Rob.
I don't have a question. I just wanted to tell Josh he's already awesome and making the positive.
Still wear videos, numbers
So we're at the top of the hour, Sheldon, but it's been a privilege to have you here, have you share your stories with us. We've got a ways to go, but I do take some comfort with the team that we have, the intention that we're taking, the fact that Lindsay flew in. This is important to Lindsay. It's important to our leadership team. It's important to the colleagues here in Atlanta. So thank you for being with us today, and we look forward. Maybe we can bring you back in a year's time, and then we can kind of tell you this is some of the progress we've made. Tell us what you think. Tell us where we can get better. And so we'd like to continue the relationship with you. And let's give Sheldon a round of applause.
Thank you.